Hey everyone, my name is Cyan and welcome to my channel. I make videos about college life, college admissions advice, and just lifestyle in general. Today I'm finally sharing with you something that I've been wanting to make a video about for months, and that's reading my Stanford admissions file. It's a process. I think when I was applying to college, I had no idea that this was going to be an accessible thing to be able to see what the admissions officer said about you in your application. But as soon as I found out about FERPA and being able to request your file from your school, I immediately did it. Like, I was really looking forward to seeing what they said. I think the first main reason why I wanted to request my files was probably because I was making these YouTube videos about the college application process. And I was putting out advice and sharing my experiences, but I really wanted to figure out if what I was saying was rooted in some kind of a truth. So I think seeing the admissions file would at least give me some perspective on the things that officers really look for and what kinds of information stands out to them and how it's presented to them and the way that they perceive it, I guess. So the first step to being able to see the file is to go to a certain website within the Stanford network, and there's a request box, and you basically just put in your information, your SUID number, and you hit request. So I was doing this at a time where it started to kind of be a trend for all the people in my class here to kind of request these files. And so I had gotten the link from someone else, and then I ended up sharing it with all my friends. Someone new from my dorm would come in and be like, oh my god, I saw my file. So yeah, obviously I was like, okay, I really want to see mine as well. And so I filled out the link, and then a couple days later, I think 2 days later, I got an email with the times that were available, and I signed up for a time. And I think they give you like a 20-minute time period, and you have to come early, and you have to make sure to bring all the things that you need, because you're not allowed to have your phone, you're not allowed to record anything digital, but you are allowed to bring a notebook and pen and write any notes that you want. So I have some pictures of the notes that I took. I am a very sporadic note taker, especially when I'm going quickly and trying to get all the information down, but this is what that looked like. So the first few pages of the file were completely unexciting. It was an exact replica of the PDF that you can download from the Common application as soon as you submit. So that was the exact same. But then came the more interesting parts. So the next page right after your just general application file was your school profile. And it had some stats about like what the ethnic breakdown was of the class size, what type of scale the school uses. And that was basically it. It was not that exciting. In that same section, they also break down your scores and your stats as well. So for me, that breakdown, they listed my ACT score, they listed my AP scores that I submitted, as well as the amount of honors classes I took, which were labeled as solids. Okay, so here is the interesting part, and this is kind of where like the Stanford admission process kind of got like debugged for me in a way. You get two different sheets from two different readers who read your application with both scores as well as like a paragraph about what they thought about reading your application. So the way the scores were presented was a little weird. It was like an acronym and then a number. So this is kind of what I decoded from the scores based on that experience. So for each category, they give you a score ranging from 1 to 5, with 1 being the strongest and 5 being less strong. So from what I can tell, just comparing and contrasting with other students in my grade, is that the average like overall score for students at Stanford currently is probably around a 2 and a 3. I would say it's in that range probably. Alright, so I'll share with you what the scores mean and also what the different admissions officers rated me for each category. So basically the categories are testing, which is your test scores, your high school ranking or high school record, your support system, which basically means like your recommendations or the people that are vouching for you. You've also got extracurricular activities, and the last category is SPIV, which is basically like the classic Stanford intellectual vitality presentation score. So for the first two categories, testing and high school record, I got the same score from both of my readers. So for testing, I got a 1, which made sense to me because I did pretty well on the ACT. And for high school record, I got a 4, which also makes sense to me just because there were more people taking much harder classes than I was and performing better with a higher GPA. So I think a 4 makes a lot of sense in that status. But I think the next categories, which were extracurricular activities, recommendations, and support, and intellectual vitality, were the most interesting. And also here is where the readers disagreed a little bit. So for the extracurricular activities category, I got a 1 from the first reader and a 2 from the second reader, which makes sense because a lot of my activities were arts-based, so that can be a little bit subjective. So for the support and recommendation category, I got a 1 from both of my readers, and I think that's because I asked teachers that really knew me well, and I got a really diverse set of teachers to vouch for me. So I would just like to reach out and give a thanks in case any of those teachers are watching me right now. One of them was my high school college counselor. She was incredible. The next was my art teacher in high school. I had my French teacher, as well as my principal when I went to do a study abroad program for a semester. So he wrote me a recommendation as well. So for the last category, the intellectual vitality category, my first reader gave me a 1 and my second reader gave me a 2. I think that's similar to probably the extracurricular activity category, just because it's a little bit more subjective and based on your essays. So for my overall scores, I got a 1 from the first reader and a 2+ from the second reader. And I think 2+ means like somewhere in between 1 and 2, which I think makes sense based on the scores that they gave me. So although the scores are interesting and they definitely give insight about how Stanford translates your qualitative values into quantitative measures, what I thought was the most interesting aspect, and probably the section they used to fight and battle for a person's admission and place, was the written paragraph section. So my notes weren't super detailed. I basically just took some main points from each of the paragraphs that I think encompassed what stood out the most to them, and I want to share with you what those 3 points are. The first is academic history, the second are activities, and the last is voice and tone. So what I noticed was important to them in terms of academic history was a gradual improvement in my scores. And that was the one thing Reader 1 was worried about. That's where that score 4 came from, was I wasn't taking as challenging classes as the rest of my grade. But then Reader 2 rebutted and basically said, like, you can tell by the steady gradual progression of my grades and like my upswing that I was constantly improving and working to get better. And I think that Reader 2 really vouched for me on that point. So the next were activities, and they specifically mentioned my art background as well as my athletic background. And I think for both of those, they really focused on the global aspect, because I had mentioned that a lot of my awards were internationally based and that I was playing tennis at an international scale. And not necessarily that I was doing things globally or super large, but I think what stood out to them the most was that it really aligned with the way that I wrote my essay, which was all about like cross-cultural like divides and making sure to get to know people and being immersed in communities globally. And I think that came through in my activities as well. And so for this point, I have specific quotes: talented, unique, accomplished artist and athlete, national, international. Cross-cultural background and experience in art, athletics, and community life truly set her apart. Like, hearing that they said that really made my like heart melt, because I really wanted to share that like multicultural and global aspect of myself. So I was just really happy that that came across. And last main point that seemed important to them and I wanted to mention was the voice and the tone that I had in my essays and my short answer questions. And so for the short answers, they refer to as popcorn, and I have a quote for that. They say, popcorn responses illustrate strong grasp of creative writing and ability to paint clear, vivid pictures with words. So that's what Reader 2 said, and I thought that was really nice. And so the words that Reader 1 used to describe my essays were strong, colorful, beautifully written, and empathetic and passionate. And those were exactly the words that I wanted to hopefully bring out through my essays. And if you want to also check out what I wrote for my personal statement, you can check out that video. I read all of my Stanford essays in my previous videos, so definitely check them out if you're curious. Ultimately, what I really think that they're looking for is to build an entire class. They're looking to build a group of people and put them together in a place to bring a certain energy to Stanford campus that they think fits with one another. And so another one of the quotes from Reader 2 was global citizen. I think she would really enrich and impact the Stanford University community on many levels. Very compelling. And that really motivated me to feel like I can be active and make my voice heard and take up space, and also work to collaborate with the people around me and create something lasting on this campus, which as a freshman can be daunting, but this is what they want you here for. Overall, reading my file was really inspiring. Also, it sparked so many dialogues with the rest of my peers, just realizing like, We are all here for a reason. They all put us here together so that we could collaborate and work with each other. And everyone had completely different experiences with their application process. Like, this was not a cookie cutter type of thing. So if you watch my other videos, you can get some perspective on what I wrote in my application and how those were applicable to my life. And I hope that this video also helps you figure out what things are important to you that you really want the admissions officers to grasp about you. So if this was helpful for you, then let me know in the comments below. Also, just ask me more questions about Stanford. I am here to answer them. If you want to stick around for the next video, hit that subscribe button. That's about it. I hope you all have an amazing day, and I will see you again soon. Bye.